Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 35th part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 35, UA Sports Festival Day 2. It was the second day of the sports festival and Izumi was vibrating with excitement. To be fair, she had been vibrating with excitement since yesterday evening, so not much had changed in the past few hours. Much to her dismay, the entire class knew about her relationship with Achiko. Neither of them had been subtle about hiding it, to be honest, especially after Inko cried her eyes out at the good news that her daughter had a girlfriend now. She had slept well that night, even if she was only snuggling up to Achiko in the Gravity Girls' room, the rest of the Snuggle Squad spending the night snuggled up in Momo's room. Whilst some of them were disappointed by this, they had all agreed that the two should at least spend one night together without the others around. The fact that this allowed the two to snuggle extra closely and spend a reasonable amount of time making out was just a happy bonus that Izumi gladly took full advantage of. Touch starvation's a bitch after all. Anyway, today was the second day of the sports festival, with the second years competing today. The first two events had already passed, the first being dodgeball with homing balls, and the second being paintball. Fun times. During those two events, Izumi could see a clear difference in skill between the hero course students and everyone else. The students of 2A and 2B dominated the festival. She was impressed by how much they had improved since last year, especially for those who didn't do well last year. Some of them had improved so much that the podium was vastly different from last year. Just goes to show just how much a year of training can do for some people. The same could not be said for the students from the other courses. The only non-hero course students who passed to the second round only got through due to luck, and even then none of them managed to pass to the third round. The second-year hero students were leagues ahead of everyone else in their year, and it showed. It's why you rarely see second-year general education students move up into the hero course, as by then, the hero students will have received a lot of training as well as experience. It's why your best and probably only chances during your first year, as by the second year the gap you will have to cross is so much bigger, and all but impossible for third years. Anyway, now that the first two events were over, it was once again time for the lunch break, or in Izumi's case, another quick trip to the restroom. Seriously Izumi, how much water did you drink today? Achiko asked as the green-haired girl left the restroom. We weren't even competing today. Izumi chuckled nervously. Sorry, I'm just rather thirsty for some reason. Translation, I was refilling my tear ducts, Durandal added, getting an annoyed look from both girls. What, you and your mother literally flooded the dorm last night? Yes, and we apologized for that, Izumi said with a sigh. Yesterday had been an emotional roller coaster after all. Anyway, we should probably be getting back to the others. Young Izumi suddenly appeared, buffed up All Might said as he leaned out from behind a corner, wearing his hero costume. Would you like to have lunch with me? He asked, holding up a rather small bento. That's so adorable, Achiko thought as she looked at the scene before her, the massively large form of All Might holding such a hilariously small bento. Wah! Izumi jumped back in surprise. I mean, sure, I'd love to. But she said nervously before Achiko put a hand on her shoulder. Izumi, it's All Might, the number one hero. You'd be a fool not to accept it, Achiko said with a smile. Besides, it's not like we won't be able to spend time together later. Izumi nervously nodded. Sure, she said before she followed All Might. I'll see you later, she said as Achiko waved them off with a smile on her face. So, how have you been as of late? All Might asked as they walked. Well, I've been fine for the most part, Izumi replied as they walked. Yesterday was a bit overwhelming. I honestly didn't expect to win the entire thing. I still can't believe I won. Don't sell yourself short, young Izumi. All Might said proudly. You did well yesterday. You won your first UA Sports Festival, just like I won mine. Be proud of your achievement. Only a few have ever won the UA Sports Festival, and now you are among their number. But that's not why I'm checking in on you today. Yesterday, during the first event, you shot forwards with incredible speed, which, whilst impressive, I don't remember being able to move that quickly. Izumi's eyes bulged. Damn it, she had forgotten to talk to him about that. Well, no time like the present. Oh, I'm so sorry, I wanted to tell you about it yesterday, but I got sidetracked. It's alright, young Izumi. Yesterday was rather busy for you. All Might said, you can be forgiven for forgetting to tell me about it. But, I would like to know what happened yesterday? I was quite worried about you when you collapsed. Izumi nodded. Well, it's dash. Wait, are you sure it's alright to talk about this out here? Out in the open? Don't worry about that, young Izumi. All Might said, the area we're in now is off limits to the general public and students. But don't worry, since you're with me you won't get into trouble for being here. Well, that's a relief, Durandal remarked. The last thing we need is for us to get into trouble because of you. Also, wouldn't it be safer to talk about this once we get to where we're going? Not exactly. All Might replied, unless you want the other top 10 heroes to find out about my secret. Oh, well, that's a dash, Izumi said with a relaxed sigh before her brain caught up with what All Might had just said. What? Oh, did I forget to mention that we will be having lunch with the rest of the top 10? All Might said, sorry, that might have slipped my mind a bit. Izumi just stared at All Might with wide eyes. All Might did not just say that, right? He didn't just say that they were having lunch with the rest of the top 10. WWWY? Why are you bringing me to meet the rest of the top 10? I know I won the first year sports festival, but I'm not important enough to even meet them. Surely one of the third years would be more deserving of the opportunity. Izumi, you may be a first-year student, but you have more than earned this opportunity. All Might said, besides, knowing you, you'd be dying to meet them. Izumi nodded frantically. Who wouldn't want to meet the top 10? She'd be a fool not to. Oh yes, you wouldn't know why Sir Night-Eye has been ghosting me? He hasn't responded to any of my texts or calls? All Might frowned. I'm afraid he's not doing it on purpose. Sir Night-Eye's missing. Izumi frowned. He's what? Missing, All Might said. We found his phone a few days after you rescued young Eri, with no sign of the man himself. We don't know what happened to him and are currently searching high and low, but we doubt that we find him. We have no leads as to his whereabouts. Izumi looked down. Sir Night-Eye had been instrumental in her training, and if anyone could help her get a grip on gearshift it would be him. But, now that he was missing, she couldn't ask him for help. Well shit, there goes your plan of interning with him, Durandal said. He would have been helpful in learning how to control the new aspect of your quirk. Wait, what new aspect? All Might asked, sounding surprised. Ah, well, yesterday something happened to One for All. I think I spoke to one of the previous users, as well as used their quirk. Izumi replied. He didn't tell me his name, but dash, she said before she stopped, her mind going back to yesterday, back when she was inside One for All. Yoichi Shigaraki, the first user of One for All, the voice of the second user repeated in her mind. How did she miss that? How the hell did she miss something so important as that? Yoichi Shigaraki, Tamura Shigaraki. Izumi. All Might said as he crouched down next to her. Are you alright? What's wrong? All for One still alive, Izumi said, tears falling from her eyes. He's still alive. What? All Might said, sounding confused. You said you never knew his real name, but the second user does. Izumi cried. He said the first user was named Yoichi Shigaraki. All Might's face dropped. Shigaraki. That was the name of the villain in charge of the League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki. If Shigaraki was All for One's surname, then there was no doubt about it, he was still alive. Izumi, my girl. I am so sorry, he said softly as he brought the girl into a hug. How is he still alive? Izumi asked. How is he alive? You said you killed him. So I did, All Might said as he gently patted Izumi's back. When I killed him, I crushed his head between my hands. There was nothing left of it. We even incinerated the body, just to be sure. He should not have survived. And yet, he did, Durandal said, and the moment he finds out that one for All has passed on to Izumi, he's going to come after her. I'm not ready, Izumi cried. I'm not ready. I can't face someone like that, I can't. I'm not strong enough. Izumi. Calm down, please, All Might said calmly. Don't worry yourself with All for One. Let me worry about him. It was my responsibility to end his reign of terror, and I failed. Allow me to correct that mistake. You should focus on getting stronger. All for one is my problem to deal with, yours is the future that will come with my passing. Izumi nodded, tears still falling from her eyes. She had hoped that All for One was as dead as All Might has said he was, but now that she knew he was still alive, she was terrified. There was no way she could face a 200-plus-year-old supervillain, not now, and she feared if he found out about her being the ninth inheritor of One for All, then she doubted he would allow her the time to get stronger. She was going to be snuggling up to Wachiko very closely for the rest of the day after this. She needed her comfort Hogaraka and Durandal plush. Maybe Snuggle Frog, Haimo, Yao Pillow, and Spiral Pillow as well. She hadn't come up with a snuggle nickname for May yet, as she had only joined them once and she didn't know if she was going to be a regular member of the Snuggle Squad. Izumi stayed within All Might's embrace for a good minute before the number one hero broke it off and rested his hands on Izumi's shoulders. Young Izumi, I promise you, I will do everything in my power to protect you from him. He said, if you want to, you can go back to your friends if you don't feel up to meeting the rest of the top 10 today. Izumi shook her head. No, I'll be fine. She was shaken yes, realizing that the villain your quirk was made to fight against was still alive would do that to you. This was probably the only chance she was going to get to meet the rest of the top 10. There was no war she was going to pass this up. Alright, if you say so. All Might said as he stood up, but if you do start feeling overwhelmed, do tell me. No one will think less of you if you decide to leave early. You won't be the first person to feel overwhelmed to be in the presence of all the top 10 heroes. Come, let's not leave them waiting. He said before they carried on their way. Also, let's leave One for All till later, okay? I feel like we've had more than enough revelations today. Izumi nodded, agreeing with All Might. After that revelation, she wasn't in the mood to talk about One for All and the new power she has. Better to leave it until later, when she's had time to get over the shock that All for One's still alive. At least she was able to inform All Might that she was able to speak to one of the previous users. That was one of the more important things she wanted to tell him. They walked in silence for about a minute before they arrived at the private VIP room reserved for the top 10. Let me go in first, Izumi. All Might said before he opened the door. I am here. Coming through the dash before he was cut off by a Gran Torino-shaped torpedo booting him in the face and sending him into the opposing wall. Damn it, All Might, I was in the middle of something. Gran Torino said as he dusted himself off. Now, where was I? Oh yes, the Tornado Lord. Now that was an interesting fight. May have broken the sound barrier during it, he said casually as he walked back into the room. Both Izumi and Durandal stood there, shocked. Did Gran Torino just boot All Might in the face, in front of the rest of the top 10? Izumi asked. I believe so, Durandal replied before the two of them looked into the room, noticing immediately the shocked looks on the faces of the other top 10 heroes. Most notable being Mirko, who had dropped the carrot she was about to eat, Lagan, whose little mole thing companion who had been sitting on his head had fallen off, and Burnin, whose hair and basically flopped. What the fuck? Ed Shot gasped. Am I the only one who just saw that? Hawks asked, pointing towards the door, because I believe I just saw an old guy kick All Might into a wall. No, we all saw it, Ryukyu said as All Might pulled himself out of the wall he was just kicked into. Was that really necessary? All Might asked as he walked into the room. Yes, Gran Torino replied casually, not caring in the slightest that he just booted the number one hero into a wall in front of the rest of the top 10. I was in the middle of telling your co-workers the story of how I took down the Tornado Lord, and you interrupted it. I can see that, All Might said, rubbing his face. Why are you even here? Meeting the rest of the top 10, Gran Torino replied. They're a lot different from the lot from my day. A lot less self-centered and glory-seeking than the old lot. But, to be fair, the Avalon War did change how people saw heroics as a profession, so I kind of expected them to be a bit different. Right, All Might said, shivering with fear. All Might, who exactly is this guy? Burnin asked. He's my old homeroom teacher, All Might replied, shivering with fear. Ah, now the kicking you in the face makes sense, Hawks said with a nod. Izumi had remained by the door, not knowing how to process what had just happened. Yes, she was in the presence of the top 10, but her excitement kind of got kicked into the wall alongside All Might. So she was now just standing there, awkwardly. Hi. Durandal poked his head into the room. Well, isn't this awkward? Chiharu was happy, which was a rarity for her since for most of her life she had been stuck in an abusive care home with a mother who rarely checks in on her. But hey, UA was such a breath of fresh air over that stuffy place. The school wasn't bad per se, it was one of the best middle schools in the country. The experience was just tainted by the place she was living at. No, she was happy because yesterday was fantastic. Okay, so she accidentally and somehow ended up competing in the third round of the festival. Not sure how that happened, or how she was able to win her first fight. Those mines she used weren't that strong, but when your opponent rushes in like an idiot, ragdolling him around with a bunch of explosions became rather easy, especially when she found out something rather interesting. Whilst she can only lay one minefield at a time, as long as her hand doesn't leave the ground, any mine that detonates can be quickly replaced. It was how she was able to force the other teams back during the second round. As long as her hand doesn't leave the floor, she can lay as many mines as she likes and replace them as quickly as she loses them. Izumi was right, she was terrifying. Chiharu, a voice said behind her, causing her to stop in her tracks. A voice that was not one she wanted to be hearing today. She turned around and looked down the corridor. Standing there, a good distance away, was her mother, Chitose Kazuki. Side by side the two looked almost identical, with the only difference being that Chitose had her hair long. This was a fact Chiharu hated, as none of her physical traits came from her father. Her mother wore a navy blue, shoulderless dress with long sleeves and an X-shaped belt with a circular buckle around her waist. An unbuttoned, salmon-colored jacket with black fur around the collar and hem, and light-colored laced high boots. She also had gold earrings hanging from her ears. Chiharu's eyes narrowed at the sight of her mother. Why the hell was she here? And why today and not yesterday, when she was competing in the sports festival? Hello mother, she said with a frown. Chiharu. I just wanted to congratulate you on performing so well during the sports festival yesterday, Chitose said with what looked like a motherly smile, but Chiharu wasn't quite sure. She knew all too well that her mother could easily fake a smile. You've improved so much with your quirk. A little bit late for that, Mother. Chiharu spat, causing her mother to take a step back in shock. And yes, I have been improving my quirk, no thanks to you, she said with a scowl. Funny thing really, everyone kept telling me to make more mines, and not once was I told to combine them. Not even by you. Chiharu, Chitose said before she was cut off by her daughter. Why the hell did you never tell me how Dad's quirk worked? Chiharu asked loudly. Why did you never tell me he had to combine his lights to make them stronger? I could have gotten a handle on my quirk so much sooner had you just told me how his quirk worked. But you didn't. You didn't tell me shit. You left me in a hellhole with nothing but parietal information, in a place where your worth was based on how fucking strong your quirk was. My life could have been so much better if that little piece of information. Chiharu, I thought you already knew, Chitose said, trying her best to salvage this. The fuck? Chiharu shouted. What the fuck, mother? What the fuck made you think that I knew that? I was a bloody late bloomer. My quirk only came in after he died. I expected you to tell me how his quirk worked, that I might have had better control over it, but you didn't. He never told me how his quirk worked. All I knew about Akito's quirk was that when he touched a wall, lights would start appearing on it. Not once did either of you tell me how his quirk worked. She fumed. And where the hell were you yesterday? Us first years were competing yesterday, not today. So where the hell were you? Chitose said, tears starting to pool around her eyes. I was busy, she said, lowering her head. Chiharu growled. That's it, you were busy? You're always saying that. Every time you're either late or can't make it to something you come up with the same excuse. I was busy. Too busy with what? Your little media empire that you care about more than your own daughter. Chiharu, please, I do care about you, Chitose said, trying to hold back her tears. Yeah, well, you have an odd way of showing it, Chiharu said before she turned and stormed off, leaving her mother alone in the corridor. It wasn't long after Chiharu had left that Chitose broke down and collapsed against the wall, crying. Sometime later, Izumi was making her way back to the stands, beaming brightly and holding several of her notebooks, all of which now contained the signatures of the rest of the top 10. And Gran Torino's, much to All Might's dread. She very much enjoyed spending time with the top 10 heroes, even if she was overcome with a wave of dread whenever Mirko looked at her. But she didn't mind them much. She's had worse glares from Katsuki. The other top 10 were nice as well. She even showed them her analysis of their quirks. You really are a hero nerd, aren't you? Durandal remarked. Yep, Izumi beamed, smiling brightly, and I have no shame. Half of them had existential crisis due to you dissecting their quirks, Durandal said. I apologized. You made Ryukyu question her existence. How did you even do that? Again, I said I was sorry, Izumi said before she bumped into someone, causing her to fall onto the floor and sent her notebooks flying. She fell backwards onto the floor, landing on her rear with a thud. Well, that was both painful and embarrassing. She looked up to see who she had just bumped into, seeing a man with a reptile-like appearance, with bright green scales for skin and a face shaped like that of a lizard. His hair was long and swept backwards, with desaturated pinkish-purple color. He was wearing a light blue two-piece suit. Izumi, realizing that she had bumped into him and caused him to drop a lot of papers, got up and bowed. The lizard man looked at her with a bewildered look on his face. You are Japanese? Izumi, say that again, but this time don't speak at 1000 RPM, Durandal said. Not everyone can understand you. Izumi nervously got up and nodded sorry. Ah, it's okay kid, the lizard man said as he stood up and picked up his papers. I wasn't exactly looking where I was going. Hey, let me help with those, Izumi said as she crouched down and picked up several sheets of paper. As she was picking them up, something caught her eye. Dreadnought case? Isn't that a retired British pro hero? It is, the lizard man replied as he took the piece of paper Izumi was reading. But it's a bit of a complicated case that doesn't involve the pro hero Dreadnought. It's someone else. Well, he did retire 4 years ago to work at Helsing High School, Izumi said as she passed him the rest of the files. Thanks, the lizard man said as he sorted out his field before a few of Izumi's notebooks and passed them to her. I think these belong to you. Oh, thank you, Izumi said as she took the notebooks back. So who are you? I mean, I know you work here. I think you wouldn't be back here unless you were a member of UA's staff. Not that I'm a staff member, I was just invited back here by All Might for something. Please don't report him. Wow, hey, it's okay kid. I'm not going to report you, the lizard man said. Anyway, the name's Shuichi Iguchi, I'm an intern for the Wild Pussycats, and by extension, UA. You work for the Wild Pussycats, Izumi said with a smile. What's it like? It's Shuichi said before a female voice behind him said, oh Shuichi, causing him to blush and panic. Oh gods, please help. Izumi was confused by Shuichi's sudden panic until Pixie Bob appeared out of nowhere, put an arm around Shuichi and pulled him close to her, his head pressed against her breasts. Do you have those files I asked for? Yes boss. I've got the files right here, Shuichi said with a shudder before muttering, oh lord, please help. Izumi and Durandal sweat dropped. Oh, so that's what it's like, Izumi thought, feeling sorry for the poor guy. That's good to hear, Pixie Bob with a smile. Let's go back to the stands, shall we? Wouldn't want to miss the last event. Sure, Shuichi said nervously as he was basically dragged off. I kind of feel sorry for that guy, Durandal said as they watched them leave. Well, the Wild Pussycats have been operating for a while, and they're all still single, Izumi said with a sigh. Guess one of them got a little desperate. I wonder why, Durandal said as the two walked back to the 1A stand, where the rest of their class would be waiting. On the way there, they bumped into Hitoshi, who looked rather happy for once. Hey Hitoshi, you look happy, Izumi said as they walked up beside him. Well, I managed to speak to my dad today, Hitoshi said. Izumi smiled brightly. You got to speak to him? Hitoshi nodded. Yep. Wasn't able to yesterday due to competing in the festival, but today I had time to talk to him. Took a while to find him, but I did. It was good, to be able to speak to him face to face. I just wish that my mother was there as well. Izumi frowned and lowered her head. Hitoshi's mother had been in a coma after a car crash 4 years ago. Wasn't even a villain attack, just a drunk driver who was also both a hero and on the clock at the time, who rammed into her whilst speeding past a red light. That hero's career died that night, as well as his bank account, as Hitoshi's dad sued him for every yen he was worth. His mother survived, but suffered severe head injuries and has been stuck in a coma ever since. It was saddening what happened to his mother. But it could have been so much worse. She could never have been given the chance to wake up at all. So, what did you talk to your dad about? Izumi asked. Oh, the usual, Hitoshi said, checking in on how we're doing, how my hero training is going, etc. Normal family stuff. Well, as normal as we can get, that is, he said with a sigh. Sometimes I wish that dad could just quit the army, but he can't really do that whilst mother's still in a coma. We won't have any money coming in. Anyway, how's your dad doing? Heard he had to leave early today. Izumi nodded yes. He's leaving for the moon tomorrow, so he had to leave today so that he could reach the shuttle on time. He left before the second-year festival started, so I was able to see him off. She thought back to earlier in the day, of what her dad told her just before he left. I am so proud of you, Izumi. Words cannot describe just how proud of you I am. And, I'm sorry I couldn't have been there for you more. You went through so much pain and I couldn't do anything to help. Izumi didn't blame him, she could never blame her father. How could she? He cared about them more than anything. It was why he was so reluctant to leave for the moon the first time. But, Inko convinced him to follow his dream. And now, it was time for Izumi to follow hers. And he was going to support her every step of the way. Well, it's nice that he was able to watch you compete yesterday in person, Hitoshi said with a smile. Yep, Izumi said as they reached the one stand. Hey guys, she said as they sat down. So, Izumi, Mina said with a smile, how did your lunch with All Might go? I kind of told them, Ochako added quietly. That's okay, Izumi said. I didn't expect it to stay secret for long. Anyway, it went well. Got to meet the rest of the top 10 too. You what? The entire class gasped. I can't believe you got to meet the god of manliness himself. Ijiro said as he shed a manly tear. I'm sorry, what? Mina asked, sounding confused. The pro-hero Gurren, Japan's 7th highest ranked hero. Ijiro replied, crying manly tears. He is the pinnacle of manliness. Several of their classmates sweat dropped at Ijiro. I also have his signature, Izumi added nervously. I'm not worthy. Ijiro suddenly blurted out as he started to bow before her, confusing the green-haired girl to no end. Now where have I seen that kind of behavior before? Durandal wondered. Okay, that's enough out of you, Mina said as she picked him up by the scruff of his neck and sat him back down in his chair. So Himiko said as she leaned in between the two girls, how's your relationship going? Well, I know we've only just started, Izumi said nervously, but I'm not sure where to go from here. I never expected to have a girlfriend before. We could always just go on a date, Ochako said with a smile. Izumi Midoriya.exe has stopped responding and needs to restart. Ochako merely smiled as Izumi's brain rebooted. Okay, maybe that was a bit too soon and she was definitely going to apologize for that. Izumi slowly turned towards Ochako. Www what? Why? Ochako placed a hand on Izumi's shoulder and gave her a gentle squeeze. Izumi, you are my girlfriend. Of course I would like to go out on a date with you. Just, don't expect much from my end of things. Money is rather tight for me at the moment. Oh, well, Izumi said nervously, I may already have something like that planned. My dad may have gotten me 2 tickets to the Pilio Planetarium. There's supposed to be a special presentation about the Abyss Cloud Nebula as well as the nearby Odysseus Cloud Nebula next weekend, and he got me tickets to it. Ochiko's eyes widened in surprise. Why you managed to get 2 tickets to that event? How? As I said, my dad got them for me, Izumi replied nervously, said I should treat you to something nice. Achiko suddenly rushed forwards and hugged Izumi, causing the green-haired girl to let out a light yelp. "Thank you," she cried, tears falling from her eyes. She was over the moons right now. "Okay, that was unexpected," Durandal remarked, sounding confused. This was confusing, he didn't expect this kind of reaction from the gravity girl. But then again, the Pileo Planetarium was one of the largest planetariums in the country, and was a rather expensive place to go to. "I wish I could go out on a date," Himiko said with a frown. She was happy that Izumi and Achiko had finally gotten together, but still, she would like to go out on a date with someone. "You could always ask me out on a date, Ribbit," Sue said bluntly. Himiko.exe has stopped responding and needs to restart. Sue croaked. She was not going to apologize. "This is payback for putting your hands up my shirt and down my shorts last night," Ribbit the frog girl thought, not that she was bothered by what the vampire cat girl did. If anything, she was annoyed that was all she did. Himiko, and by extension all the members of the Snuggle Squad, were cute. Eri especially, because she was adorableness incarnate and deserved all the hugs. But the other, older girls her age were cute as well, and she wouldn't mind dating any of them, or all of them. Preferably the latter. "What, I'm a frog who knows what she likes, Ribbit." The foundation was already laid, thanks to Izumi and Achiko. Now, all she had to do was build upon those foundations. But she had to build slowly since the foundations weren't exactly stable. It was obvious to everyone that Izumi was a fragile girl, and taking things too quickly would just hurt everyone involved. So, she'll take it slow. Besides, even if they decide not to be poly, at least she got the vampire cat girl. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the therapist was pissed, oh so very pissed. And then Mirai Sasaki laughed, still tied to the chair he'd been stuck in for the past day or so, and then, he tried to kick All Might in the dick. He laughed uncontrollably. "I was laughing my arse off." This short, gremlin of a man, tried to punch All Might, a massive monster of a man, in the dick. He couldn't even reach his knees. The therapist was pissed. Never before had he had such an annoying and strong-willed bastard. Normally the people he uses his quirk on would break after a few minutes, but Mirai here had lasted almost an entire fucking day, and it was getting on his nerves. Oh, the man was broken, no doubt about it, but not broken in the way he wanted him to be. He was just laughing, and he just wouldn't fucking stop. He was cracking jokes and telling funny stories, laughing his arse off. And it pissed him off. He wasn't even able to get anything useful out of the man. All Might just flicked the guy away. Didn't even have to use much power to do it. Mirai laughed, sounding almost insane at points. The therapist snarled behind his gas mask before he got up, walked over to Mirai and punched him in the face, hard, sending him to the floor and knocking him out. He then turned around and walked out of the room. "Fucking arsehole!" The therapist shouted as he punched the opposing wall, causing an old sign with the logo of the old Schnee Oil Company to fall. A tragic reminder of one man's quirkiest beliefs ending the reign of one of the largest oil companies in the world, as well as the end of the Schnee bloodline. There were no more Schnees left in the world, which was a shame as they had such an interesting quirk that would have been so interesting to experiment with. He could just imagine a Nomu with that kind of power at its disposal. "Is everything alright?" a voice asked to his side. "Everything is fine, Dr. Kidaigaraki," the therapist said as he turned towards the man, a fairly old man of a portly and short stature, with a bald and a very large and bushy mustache. "Is Sir Night-Eye causing problems?" Kudai asked. "He just won't break," the therapist shouted, punching the wall again before taking several deep breaths to calm himself down. "Sorry, I don't often lose my temper. But Sir Night-Eye, I've never met someone who's so resilient to being broken. Even people whose quirks allowed them to resist mental attacks lasted only about an hour against me. But he has lasted more than a day against me. I don't know how he's been able to last so long. It shouldn't be possible. Maybe we should ask the master to interrogate him?" Kudai recommended. The therapist shook his head. "Wouldn't work. He doesn't have any quirks that are good for interrogations, and in his current condition he can't use mine, and even if he could, it's a complicated and delicate quirk. Besides, even if he uses that one mind-reading quirk of his, he probably won't be able to gather anything useful. I used my quirk on him too much. His mental state is now best described as scrambled eggs. A pity, cute, I said, we could have learned so much from him. Oh well, time to turn him into a Nomu. Just don't subject him to too much mutation gas, the therapist said. We're trying to make a high end with him. Too much gas will kill his higher brain functions. And subject him to the gas in small quantities. We have no idea how his additional quirks will mutate. Don't worry, I'll exercise caution this time, kid, I said. Now, what shall we name this new Nomu? Well, seeing how he's now a laughing maniac, how about Frank, the therapist said. Cute, I looked at him with an unimpressed look in his eyes. How about we come up with a name later? Once he's finished. The therapist lowered his head. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, he said. He wasn't the best when it came to naming Nomus. Seriously, if he had his way, the Nomu that was designed to kill All Might would have been called Jeff. Anyway, they had a Nomu to make out of All Might's old sidekick. Somewhere else in the world, in some dark back alley of some city in America, a dark figure was standing over the bloody remains of a person. The body splattered across the surrounding brick walls and floor in a bloody red mess. A gloved hand with metal claws on it waved over the remains, followed by them getting torn apart at the atomic level, leaving no evidence that someone just got murdered in a rather messy fashion. Once there was nothing left of the body, the figure turned and walked off. Its job here done, 1 down, 8 to go. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 36. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.